Right, so welcome everyone to our episode number 3, featuring the best faction of them all and the only empire, if you think about it. So it's, of course, Nilfgaard. So I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. KingChezz, and some lovely guests. Would you care to introduce them, Mr. Chezzy?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm obviously KingChezz. Great to be here. My favourite personal faction. Big fan of Nilfgaard, as I'm sure many of our viewers will know. Basically today we're going to be being joined by Mr. Gorflow from Team Leviathan Gaming.
Hello.
And by the one and only Mr. Freddybabes.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, hype intensifies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how's it going?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing well. So, Mr. Beardy, now that we've the intros have been done and everybody's been introduced, would you like to carry on with the rest of the show?
Yeah, of course. So, as with like each episode, we're gonna start with discussing everyone's history with current faction. In this case, Nilfgaard. So, what were everyone's favorite decks and cards and etc. So, in my case, I believe it's spies. So the thing is, I never really mastered them, but I was on my way, becoming a decent spy player. But it just with the current nerf, the guys are pretty much useless, at least in forces. I mean, I guess some people will disagree, but yeah, that was probably my favorite archetype. And I guess if we go really back in the day, I thought that Khalit with pulling golems when they were orders, I believe, that was pretty hilarious as well. So certainly a bit overtuned, I would say, but yeah, I recall those two, I guess. But yeah, that's me. How about you, Senor Freddy?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember playing anything other than spies for Nilfgaard. I don't know. I've never actually taken to that faction that much. I know in closed beta there was a pretty cool control deck with rock tossers and stuff like that, but I didn't really play it. So I was pretty new to the game, and yeah, Spies was cool while it was strong, and now it's not so good. But there are lots of other decks you can play.
Yeah, but if you go back how Spies were initially, they weren't overpowered, right? The way back in the day, nobody really complained about the Spies per se, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the archetype's always been pretty good, right? When Enforcers did all the pews every time.
Yeah, just because it's so damn consistent, right? So
yeah, big thinning. But yeah, apart from that, I'm failing to think of any Nilfgaard archetypes that didn't get nerfed pretty immediately, apart from the ones that we have on this patch, which are quite a few.
Right. So how about you, Mr. Gorflow?
Well, Nilfgaard will always hold a special place in my heart, only because I got into Gwent during the summer of 2017. So this was in the height of the Monsters Death Wish carryover meta, which, terrorized the ranked ladder for a long time. And I was a new player, and I came to the conclusion that Reveal was the best archetype, because I figured that since you're revealing your opponent's cards, right, you're going to be able to see what cards they have, and you'll be able to use that information to beat everyone, right? I figured that would be the mechanic in the game which rewards the most skill, because a skilled player could take that information and then use it to their advantage. So, in my mind, that was the thing to do. And I was playing, I think at the time I was playing the only reveal list that there was, which was the one which revealed 1,000,000 times, grew the spotters up to 20-something points, and then you slam them down like they were Dolbothana protectors at the end of the game, right? Just like in Spellitel. Unfortunately, that wasn't super strong in that meta, and I ended up losing a lot. But it was the first real deck that I focused on and learned how to play, and it was my favorite. It still holds a special place in my heart, but you won't see me playing that again nowadays. Now it's more Soldier Swarm, I think, is my new favorite.
Okay, interesting. And finally, we have the best reply yet. So, Mr. Chezz.
Well, I mean, the first Nilfgaard deck I ever played, it was Spies, right? So I started around the same time Gorflow did, but I concentrated on player dwarf, buffer dwarf back then. I was a Squirtle main. I was a Squirtle main for a long time. And then Spy Nilfgaard became a thing, and I started getting better and better at the game, and I decided, well, why not try the best deck in the game, right? As I'm getting better. So started out with Spy Nilfgaard, spent a long time playing Spy Nilfgaard. Got pretty good. That was my first good score on Pro Ladder I got with Spy Nilfgaard. Got Spy Nilfgaard up to like 1380, something like that in my first proper Pro Ladder season. But then came Midwinter, and they kind of went a bit crazy on the old enforcers, the old machine gun enforcers. They were quite fun, but a bit OP, right? And then they nerfed them, and they became probably a little less competitive than was intended. I mean, they're still decent, right? They're still a very good deck for countering the meta, but they're not necessarily particularly great anymore. And so then the only thing I could play on Pro Ladder was Alchemy, right? Alchemy was the #1 most dominant Nilfgaard deck, and I just never ever felt comfortable playing Alchemy. Never really enjoyed it. So funny story. Yeah. So funny story. I was getting what I was on. I think my score with Nilfgaard that season with Alchemy, I had like an 1150 score, which for anybody who knows what Pro Ladder is, there you'll know how bad that is for Nilfgaard. So I went and spoke to my buddy, Mr. Saber97, who is in chat right now, and I said, look, can you get me a Nilfgaard deck that'll work? I can't play with this alchemy bullshit. So I sent him a deck that I thought was decent. With it was a Sirinova Soldier Engine deck, and he was like, no, that's rubbish. That is not what you should be playing. And he went away and created what is today now known as Soldier Swarm, right? And he sent that over to me, and I've now probably played about 1,500 games with that deck, I think, something around there. And yeah, it's probably my favorite deck of all time, the Soldier Swarm deck. A lot of fun. Had some really good results with it, and yeah, that's basically, apart from Spy Nilfgaard, it's the only Nilfgaard deck I've really played a lot of, and yeah, I really enjoy it. So it's basically made Nilfgaard my favorite faction all on its own, simply through Soldier Swarm. So really enjoy Soldier Swarm.
All right, so yeah, I agree. So what's the next on the agenda, Mr. Chezz?
So next on the agenda, we're going to jump into some hot topics from the current meta. So I think we should start off with an interesting topic of discussion, which is is Nilfgaard the strongest faction in the game right now? Obviously, it's got quite a few of the strongest decks. There's arguably got 3 or 4 of the top decks in the game right now. So the question is Nilfgaard the strongest faction in the game right now, or is it not? Let's start with you, Beardy. What do you think?
I always have to break the ice, right? So yeah, I think it's the strongest faction. Why? Because everyone knows why, right? So yeah, that's my answer. So yeah, like honestly, like you have. So you have like sick finisher in form of like Kahir into like gold, so whatever. You have so much control which counters like great swords completely. So that like alone makes the archetype like faction, but like alchemy as a whole really powerful. And then like just like like a backup plan, you have a Sire to completely win the game against certain decks, like like Full Test, or even like any deck, like a Sire can like straight up like win like some matches.
You trying to tell me that Azir is your backup plan and not your AVS
Yeah. I mean, it's just in my opinion, like using a Saya to put back like Cantarella and that stuff. It just come baggy, so I just use it as my last like last resort, right?
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, today I actually I was playing Usurper and I got like Usurper into Philevangel into Decoy Saya, and I shuffled back a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I guess I do that occasionally. But yeah, I would say like NG is the hands down the best faction. Like you have options for like greed options as well with what's it called, hand buff, which can like can put down like lots of points. Then you have like your soldiers, which can in theory beat like anything. So I see no real weaknesses, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess like weather decks are kind of like harder than G because nobody runs Van Hammer. So I guess that's kind of like the only I guess like weakness which can be like seen. But yeah, that's my opinion. So how about you, Mr. Gorflow?
Well, thinking about Nilfgaard's place in the meta and whether or not it's the strongest faction is heavily dependent, in my opinion, on Skellige. So I think all of us here can agree that Nilfgaard is one of, if not the best, graveyard hate factions in the game, right? With Asira and the cheap Vico medics, you can really punish Skellige because of the fact that they rely on their graveyard reses or their late game power, right? That's almost always been the case with the great swords and with the Tursic veterans. It's always that late game big graveyard res. It's like a big finisher. So I think Nilfgaard is in the running for one of the best factions in the game right now, the strongest factions in the game right now, but only by association. It's only because Skellige is dominating. We see in my opinion, a very strong Skellige Nilfgaard meta right now, only because Skellige is leading the way with the great swords, which are just terrorizing everyone, and everyone has to tech around that. And the thing is that Nilfgaard is able to kind of leech off the strength of Skellige by stealing their really strong units in the end of the game with the medics and resurrecting them. So I definitely feel that Nilfgaard's up there, but again, only because of Skellige. Would you agree?
Okay, I mean, that's a very interesting point you put forward there, Gorflow. So you're saying that the whole meta revolves around Skellige, and Nilfgaard's just the best at countering Skellige, right?
More or less. I mean, I guess we're kind of shifting slowly away from that as I know that Full Test with the RKEs has been taking a real dominant position lately, but I still think that Great Swords has its strength. I mean, they've never been nerfed for the longest time, so they're still very strong, and I think as long as nothing changes, Skellige is going to be up there, and Nilfgaard's going to be right along there with them, right by their side.
That's a very interesting point. I definitely agree that Skellige is the other strong faction. However, I think it's a little unfair potentially to say that Nilfgaard's only so strong because of Skellige.
No doubt.
I mean, like a hand buff, for example, is weak against Skellige to a certain extent, right? Especially to great swords, and yet it's still super strong. I mean, if Skellige was out of the meta, there's an argument that hand buff would be even better, right? Even more dominant. But I do agree with the graveyard hate. That is one of Nilfgaard's strongest things. What are your thoughts on this, Freddie? What are your thoughts on the question at hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit all the points really well. Like, they have so many decks, Nilfgaard, that do different things really well. And yeah, in every meta, it's like rock, paper, scissors going on, right? Hand buff is like that greedy deck that really is punishing sort of full tests that aren't tapped for it and stuff like that. And those weaker, maybe more conservative tempo decks. And then you've got the alchemy, controlling, and then you've got soldiers, which like comes in from the back and like takes out alchemy, right? So yeah, I think that's even worth mentioning. Like, some of the Nilfgaard decks are even built to beat other Nilfgaard decks. That's how dominant Nilfgaard is, like, across the board. Like, even with what sort of, you've got like the kind of hand buff deck, the Saber, like what reveal hand buff or whatever it's called, and the other Calvite tempo decks, which are also like definitely tier 2, arguably maybe up there with alchemy and that sort of stuff. So yeah, like there's so much to choose from. You can definitely say that Skellige's also like high up, maybe equal with some of those Nilfgaard decks depending on the meta. But yeah, it's for sure the strongest, if not one of the strongest, or the other way around. You know,
yeah, for sure. No, I think you make a great point there. I think. I mean, obviously Skellige has decks that are as strong as Nilfgaard, or at least in the question to be as strong as Nilfgaard. But I think the one thing Nilfgaard has over all other factions right now is the diversity. I think it has the most competitive lineups, right? You've got spies, you've got soldiers, you've got alchemy, you've got handbuff, you've got reveal, you've got tempo. So that's 6 decks that are all competitively viable that you can easily get to GM with. I mean, I've even seen people play Miller up at near GM level. So I mean, I'm not going to talk about Mill, right? That's the one and only mention we're going to have of Mill on this talk show.
It's obviously an OP deck, right? So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
No.
But I played so much Mill, I forgot completely about that. That's my favorite Nilfgaard deck.
Yeah. Like, end the show. Kick me. But no. So they have 7 different archetypes or different decks that are very viable. And I mean, there's a lot of factions right now that only have 1, right? So I think it's a bit greedy for Nilfgaard, but I think if that's the way you want to say on what's the best faction right now, I think Nilfgaard's head and shoulders above on diversity. Maybe not on power, but on diversity, I think it is head and shoulders above all the other factions personally. Speaking of at the moment, where do we think that CDPR are going to go with a faction identity of Nilfgaard coming with Homecoming? What do you think, Gorflow, on this one?
It's hard to say, not having checked it out yet, but I'm gonna have to say that from what I've heard, at least with Homecoming, they're going to be making Nilfgaard much more control oriented. As far as, I guess, I don't know what that means for Homecoming. I'm guessing like removal, more locks, more disruption in terms of manipulating your opponent's deck composition through cards like the Guardian and Asira, and maybe a buffed version of Zarthisius. Who knows? I mean, anything's possible, right? It's all pure speculation from me at this point, though, for Homecoming related things.
Okay, but what do you want them to do with it?
What would I want them to do with it?
Yeah. I should have worded it slightly.
I'd want them to make Nilfgaard the strongest faction in the game, just absolutely crushing all other factions. No one else should have a chance to win or to have fun. Most importantly, no fun. No, I don't know. I think that it would be cool to, going back to the reveal thing, because I'm always in my heart, I'm gonna be a reveal player. I think it would be really cool to somehow make it so that seeing your opponent's cards gave you like a more tangible advantage as a more experienced player. Like as a more experienced player, you can glean more from seeing your opponent's cards. So I'd like there to be more things for you to do as a response to seeing your opponent's cards. Like we have things like Serret, right? Or the bronze Serrets that are 1 point. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah,
the guys that they steal all the health out of the card and then they boost themselves and they make that card like pretty much useless. It sucks when you're playing Selkirk, right? And you get Selkirk lowered to 1. That's cool and all. Yeah, that's a neat interaction. That's neat.
That is not cool.
Well, you know what I'm saying. It's not cool if you're playing it, but if you're playing as the Nilfgaard player, it's fun.
Yeah, for sure.
We should see some more things that I don't know, interact in interesting ways with seeing your opponent's hand and maybe capitalizing on that.
Okay, yeah, I like that. The problem with reveal, right, is it can never be tier 1, because if it's ever tier 1, it's just S tier just by the fact that, I mean, it's not that it's S tier, right? Because at the moment, the actual reveal mechanic is basically worth 0 points, right? Because top players play around everything anyway. So obviously there is some advantage to senior cards, but the problem with reveal is it would just be so strong at lower tiers be so strong at lower tiers. So they have to be careful with reveal, but I do like that idea. How about you, Mr. BeardyBog? What's your opinion on what they should do with Nilfgaard come home?
Yeah, so I don't really have information on this topic, so my guess is as good as yours. But it's kind of hard because I think like Nilfgaard as a whole at the moment is like really well like thought out and I guess like balanced to the degree, as like Freddie mentioned before. Like you have like NG decks which like counter other NG decks. So like I really like the state of Gwent NG wise in form of like so many viable decks and archetypes. So I would just hope they kind of like retain the number of like decks you can actually play. But I don't know, maybe make spies great again, but I guess it's not happening. But yeah, I don't know. Like I have no information, so I can't really speculate. It's just like I don't know, out of my realms of possibility. Yeah. What about you, Mr. Freddy?
Yeah, like everything you said there, I agree with. Yeah, Nilfgaard's like one of those interesting factions because it has so many like distinct archetypes compared to the other factions, right? Like for Scoia'tael, what if you got like some elf guys? Okay, that's
Yeah,
pretty much
dwarves.
the archetype. Okay, dwarves and elves. Okay, fair enough. Bad example. But you know what I mean? Like, there's just not a lot going on in a lot of the other factions. But Nilfgaard, you've had Mill in the past. You've got the spies. You've got disloyal units. That's like a really cool mechanic that I'd like to see more of. But we'll see if that happens. Maybe not. What else? They've got like all this alchemy stuff going on with this like deck building cost and that impacting how you build your deck and then play it in the games. Yeah, they've got that archetype. They've even got reveal as well, as we talked about. So yeah, there's so much like different stuff. Yeah, as you were saying, different archetypes that you can play, different mechanics. So like more fundamentally, like the way the deck actually functions and what it plays for is so different in Nilfgaard than any other faction, I think. And yeah, hopefully they just keep that how it is for Homecoming, and maybe like I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about other factions, but if the other factions could gain sort of that level of distinct different things going on, that'd be really awesome. But yeah, disloyal units would be nice, and I think reveal and more mechanics with that would be cool, of course. But yeah, apart from that,
Seems good. So I think we're all in agreement that Nilfgaard's in a pretty good spot now, and I guess leave Nilfgaard alone and work on all the other factions. Make all the other factions great like Nilfgaard. Yeah, that sounds about right to me. All right, Mr. BeardyBog. We now that we've covered that, do we want to move on to some viewer questions? Do we have any today?
Yeah, I mean, like we should, right? So, right. So, first question is from like our fellow team member, Mr. Saber97. With a little addition to it by Chezzy. Yeah. So, Chezzy loves Sire. So, yeah, this is a very, very good question. How important is Sire to NG's dominance in the current meta? I would say like really big impact. Like I can't really like stress enough how Asai is important. So if you think about it this way, like worst case scenario, you shuffle back like Roach, and that's like 11 plus 4, so that's I guess like still pretty good. And you can shuffle like some utility cards, like another ointment to chain with your novices, and that's like Asai low rolling, right? Which is kind of crazy. And if you look at like other scenarios where like Asai can like single-handedly win in the game, so it's like you deny restore target, you deny like Freya's, then you have like obviously like DJ Massacre or whatever. Because like fundamentally every faction like at this moment is kind of like dependent on the graveyard. I guess like the only exception is ST, even though like dwarves are quite popular right now. But I think like just that fact that like graveyard is like so damn important, and Asai can like completely screw that, makes Asai the number one, I would say the best still in the game. So yeah, that's my opinion, my opinion alone. But how about you, Mr. Freddy?
Yeah, like I'm not sure like how much of an impact she herself makes. Like I think Nilfgaard would be really strong without her even. But maybe some of those more 50-50 matchups would be a little bit worse, like that Foltest matchup, for example. not being able to shuffle stuff back. But I think Asaya like occupies a pretty similar spot to Mandrake in a weird way, but like with extra utility on top, right? Because it's in a way it's like a carryover play in a lot of cases. If you play her, you can play her for that. You can also play her later in the game for just value, like you're talking about with Roach, or maybe shuffle a Black Blood or a second Mandrake and all this. You can do so much with it. Like it can tech certain matchups as well, you know, allowing you to reuse your utility or your hard removal or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of like Mandrake in the way that it's super flexible and it sees play in like all of the Nilfgaard decks as a result.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like the faction would still be strong without her. She's just like an added bonus, which like 1 in 7 games or whatever just wins you it on its own, and the rest of the time is just a solid silver. So yeah, good card.
Would you play her if she was like 3 points, like if she was nerfed by 3 points or something?
No, probably not. I don't know, like a lot of the time she does end up being 11. Do you know what I mean? Like if you have Roach not popped out the deck already, or if you're not playing Roach, like a lot of Nilfgaard decks don't run Roach, at least the ones I'm playing. Yeah, 11 points for a silver is actually pretty bad. Like there are cases where you just lose because your Asaya doesn't actually perform, and you forget that you're playing like a pretty suboptimal card. That's worse than what a bronze is, pretty much, right? So, yeah, I think if you nerfed her on points, she'd probably not see play. But people will probably disagree with me. Like, yeah, she'd maybe be average or good still.
All right, how about you, Mr. Gorflow?
Okay, well, let me preface this by saying I still don't know how to pronounce this card. I don't know if it's Asira or Asira or Asira or what, but we'll call her Asira for now, just so we're all on the same page. Asira was already strong before Silver Spies became non-doomed, right? She was already included in decks. Now, she's auto-include. You know, any kind of Nilfgaard deck could find value, typically, by putting their Silver Spy back into the opponent's deck. I feel like that change brought Asire from being a gold card, or sorry, a silver card, right? She's not gold, but to a platinum card, all right? She's one of the 2 platinum cards in the game. I've said it before and I'll say it again. She's super, super strong, not even on the level of other cards, just because of the fact that she has so many uses. You can put back your sentries into your deck as Soldier Swarm. You can put, you know, Bronze Weathers your opponent created back into their deck if you're playing against like Dagon or something like that. It just has a bunch of different applications as a card. And, you know, I think that a small change, maybe not in the power level, right? Maybe not bringing her down to an 8 or a 9 or something, but maybe in the ability, maybe by just making Spies doomed again, I think would bring her back down to more, you know, normal kind of playable level, right? But, you know, I feel as though Asire is a huge part of why Nilfgaard is so dominating. I honestly can't even think of a Nilfgaard list that doesn't include her. Like, I'm trying to think of one right now as an example. If you guys could think of one, correct me, but I can't think of a single list that doesn't run Asire.
Some mill decks don't because of
Hype,
yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, but then with Asire you can put back Albric and keep on
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Heim's the other problematic card, but that's a different faction, a different discussion.
Yeah, even there, it's like you're on the fence, right? You're like, well, maybe I still will include Asire, right? It's counterintuitive to the list I'm playing, but it's so good, right? Like I'll just include it anyway. But yeah, conclusion, super, super important card. OP, in my opinion.
Okay.
I think there's something else to mention as well. Like, sorry for jumping in, but she also like influences the mirror matches and stuff, right, to such a great extent. And then also against Skellige, as we were talking about with the Heim, like you have games where it's double Asire, and that's like shaping the whole course of the match. You have to play that round 1 out, so you don't. Like, even if you're the one with the Asire, you have to play around the opponent having it as a result of you playing it. And yeah, so it probably does shape like how games play out in a huge way. So maybe I'll take back what I said. But then again, like if she wasn't included, I think the deck would still be good. It would just like play out differently, right?
Yeah. She's like definitely an interesting, cool card, and it's so cool because the card's strength lies not in its upfront point value, but in its like interesting card effect. That's awesome. Just make spies doomed again. That's all. Just make spies doomed again.
I wonder what she'd be like if she only shuffled one as well. Maybe that would be better. Like, you
Nah,
either go for your Roach, or you go for putting the Mandrake back. Yeah, like, you can't just...
certainly.
I mean, you'd always put a spy back, right?
Yeah,
like,
like-
90% of the time,
Yeah.
you'd just be putting one card, and it's just spy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you compare her to like Nanaki, she can put back like 3 cards and she's still like rubbish, right? So like I don't really think like like amount of like units you can put back is like like key.
I mean, it would definitely hurt her though. She would be worse if she could only put one back, right?
Yeah, but she maybe would still be playable enough.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, this is kind of what they did with the Guardian, right? Guardian used to have a Death Wish, put 2 golems on top of the deck. They changed it, right?
Disgusting,
So.
yeah. But it could have been locked, whereas now it's like immediate like trigger, right? So I guess it's like kind of the same to a degree. All right, so the last feedback is from Mr. KingChezzy.
So I'm on the same page as Gorflow on this one. I think that, in my opinion, she is the only platinum card. I think she is head and shoulders better than every other card in the game right now. Partly because of, I mean, like we've said, right? She bottoms out at 11, which is bad for a silver, but it's not absolutely terrible. Like it's below the power give, right? But I mean, it's not a dead 1-point recruit or a dead Igni or something, right? Ignis plays. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? It's 2 points extra on screen. So 11 points, granted, you would never run that. You'd never run an 11-point silver, but the big body helps, right? It means that helps her. That's why she's run so much. But the ability to win one in 3 games against Northern Realms simply because they hit Cantarella off DJ or have to mulligan DJ away or not throw it away, right? The fact that she wins you 1 in 3, 1 in 4, something like that, just on the spot. Literally, it doesn't matter how the game goes. You just play Azir and you just win the game. Is ridiculous. That's one of the reasons that I think she's platinum. But the other reason is, I don't think many people realize this, is that she's actually way better in soldiers than any other deck because it allows you to redo your soldier thing. I really think if you didn't have Azir, soldiers would take a massive hit. I mean, they'd still become viable, but I don't think they would be anywhere near as viable. I think Azir is kind of she doesn't necessarily make the whole deck work, but she enables it to be as good as it is right now. I think that as a soldier's main, I don't think I would the deck would be I would play it as much, right? I think I would have to learn alchemy. If Azir wasn't as good, I think I would move on to alchemy. But Azir really does make soldiers take the ability to be able to put back double sentry if you had to use on round 1, or the ability to unbrick your recruit if it's dead, or the ability to put ointments back if you had to use ointments in round 1, or say they banish your slaves, right? You can then put back other things like you've reamed and use it as a finisher and things. It really does help the soldier archetype more so than any of the others. I mean, obviously putting back Blackblood for alchemy is quite nice, or Roach, a 10-point Roach and things like that is nice. But I think she really does help soldiers more so. The other thing, just a quick one for you guys is how do we feel about Vico Medic in this graveyard hate discussion? I know Azir's obviously, I think Vico Medic kind of is, personally from my point of view, is kind of obviously not as bad as War Dancer was, but it kind of runs the same thing as War Dancer, right? You very rarely ever run triple War Dancer, and you very rarely run triple Medic, right? So it kind of makes people not think it's quite as strong maybe as it is, but I mean, I feel that Vico Medic could easily just be like a silver card with its ability to just its ability is so very strong and game winning in a lot of matches, especially against Skellige, for example.
That's how I feel. I feel like Medic is run as a silver card essentially. It's a one-off, powerful effect card. You play it once for like that key moment in the game, and it gives you typically a huge advantage if you play it at the right time. It can do great things against any deck which interacts with its graveyard. Skellige, of course, being the big one. Let's not forget Northern Realms with Shani. say you guys double dry pass going into a long round 3, they only have 1 unit in the graveyard, and it's an RKE or something like that, right? They were trying to set up for their Shani. You can go ahead and steal that right back.
For sure.
It's like, it's not like run like other bronze cards where you have 3 of, and it's like the core of your deck. I see exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and the other thing with it, right, is it's used in conjunction with Azir to brick graveyards, because sometimes there's 3 things in the graveyard and you can't brick it with just Azir, but the medic gives you the added ability to do that, right? Especially if it's like against Axeman, they'll always dry pass rain too, right? So you can Azir one of the boats they've got, and you can medic one of the boats on the dry pass and then Azir the other 2, and all their Corsairs have gone, things like that. So, but if medic was a silver, you could only run one of them, right? You would never run Azir and medic together. That's just food for thought. I just, what do you think about medic in this meta, Mr. Freddy?
I'm actually like on the complete opposite side. Like, I don't think it's a very good card.
I agree.
In a lot of situations.
Controversial opinion.
The problem with it is more that it's like one of those cards that can punish you just because it's in the opponent's deck or not. Like, if you play around it or don't, and they have it or don't, you know, it's like occupies that sort of, I don't know what the term is.
A bit
it's
like
a cat in the box thing.
Yeah. Schrodinger's.
Yeah, that's the one.
It's a bit like
Schrodinger's Vicar Medic.
Yeah, like Armor Smith and
exactly right. You play around it, and maybe you lose as a result, or you don't. And then, but yeah, if you assume they're running it and you play around, I think it can often just be a really bad card. Like, a lot of the time, for example, if you're great swords, the first res in the round matters a lot. Like, you can play around a Sire and Vico in one play by playing Restore immediately, and then playing the Freya onto your big dude or whatever. So I think a lot of the problems that Vico poses to decks, you can, you know, subvert that by playing the matchup properly. It can be like pretty valuable in some cases, but like a lot of bronzes that have that range of like being bad or good have that sort of, you know, risk reward, right? Like, sometimes it's a 15, like taking a big buff dwarf or something, or a huge greatsword. Other times it's taking a long ship which plays into coral, or maybe it's just dead because you did some dry passes. Like, I don't think the card's super great. Yeah, it's definitely like playable in some decks, but I wouldn't put it up there with a Sire. And you might say like its average value is higher than like the typical bronze, but I think there's ways to, you know, play around it, especially if you know that it's a threat.
That's very interesting. One thing I would like to say, chat, is that this guy's a mill supporter, so you may want to take what he has to say with a pinch of salt. But Mr. BeardyBog, what do you think about it?
Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna skip that like mill remark. Yeah, I don't think the card is like, from my experience, I don't think the card is like overpowered by any means. So everybody talks about like greatsword matchup, and you can steal the gigantic greatsword, right? But if you are letting the guy get like gigantic greatsword, then you're doing something wrong. That's like you know, like common sense. So you don't really need like a medic to beat that like matchup like fairly you know, like easily. And B, like, card is like super awful like in any alchemy mirror. Like I'm sure like, you know, like most alchemy players will agree with me, because like alchemy comes down to like dry pass, and like who has like fewer bricks, and then you're stuck with a card who is like 1 point, and like you can't really do much with 1 point bronze, right? Especially if they like you know, like Lily Folds into ointment immediately, and like you just can't do anything, right? So like, from my experience, the card is just like, it's just not like as impactful as like people think it is. Like, I'm talking about alchemy. Like, obviously, like in soldiers, I think the card is like much better, especially in like greatsword matchup, probably like game winning. But like, as far as like alchemy goes, I think the card is like completely unnecessary. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question we've got here is from our Discord channel by a guy called Cyclaz. Apologies if I butchered that. I am awful with names. Which archetype in NG would you guys consider the most dominant in the current meta? So I guess we start off here with Mr. Gorflow. What's your opinion on this?
Well, the most dominant in the current meta. That's a tough one. I have to go with soldiers, only because it counters some of the most popular lists in the meta right now. I feel as though Soldiers is extremely favored. Well, I mean, I don't want to be too polarizing. I'll say it's very favored against Alchemy. I think it's very favored against Great Swords, about as favored as you can be against a deck like Great Swords. Let's just say that much. Like, if you play the matchup correctly, you're going to have a situation where you're beating them in a long round where you can win if you play around Igni, or B, you're going to have first say on their graveyard in a short round 3 and be able to win that way. So it has multiple different ways to win against Great Swords. Alchemy is also very strong, right? Because of the removal and because of the, we see so many RKEs right now for full tests. So, of course, Alchemy deals with that pretty well. But Soldiers is just very maneuverable, I think. It can pivot in different ways. It can face your opponent in a long round. It can face your opponent in a short round. If they try to banish your slave infantry, you can save your golds and go for a big combo in round 3. And I think its ability to pivot like that makes it extremely strong.
Okay, yeah, I personally, I think the question, this question is, which do I think is most dominant? I would probably have to say Alchemy is the most dominant, right? Because it's the most played. Does that mean it's the best? I mean, that completely depends on the meta, right? How much Great Swords is about? Because whilst I agree that Soldiers is probably more flexible than Alchemy, Alchemy is obviously more favored against Great Swords, right? So if Great Swords are super, super strong, then I think that Alchemy might be the stronger deck at those times. So there's been times where Great Swords has been so super, super popular, and Alchemy's been the go-to. But I definitely think Alchemy is probably the most well, it is the most popular. I've seen the Gwent up stats. I know that Alchemy is the more popular. So if the question is which is the more popular, I would definitely go with Alchemy. But I do think Soldiers is probably more flexible. However, I'm slightly biased. So what do you think, Mr. BeardyBog?
Right. So what do we have? We have Alchemy, Soldiers, Handbuff, which which was mentioned before, Spice, and Tempo could be. So I think like as you said, like Alchemy is just like the the way, because like it just counters Great Swords really well, and you don't really have to be like top-notch player to win that matchup with Alchemy. So like from what we discussed in the beginning, I think that's like the sole reason why like Alchemy is like really popular. Like what really like strikes me as like kind of odd is like why Soldiers is not as like prevalent as like it was like 2 seasons ago, right? Because like with all these like Alchemy matchups, like it's just like super favored. So that's kind of like another question. Like why did like Soldiers like kind of like I don't know, like disappear to a degree?
I think that's like, maybe partly down to full test being more popular, right? And then
yeah, I guess I guess.
But I mean, at the same time, Henselt was popular back when Soldiers first came along, right? It's only the same thing. Although one thing I would say about Soldiers, whilst we're on this topic of its popularity, is it's always been underrepresented, in my opinion. Like it always has a really low play rate compared to how strong it is. I mean, a lot of top players do say it's a strong deck, but it's never had a high play rate. Like, just never. Even at high levels, it's really, really low on the play rate, and I couldn't tell you why. I don't know why.
I have a guess.
I think
Sorry, you can go ahead.
You go with your guess. Go.
My guess.
All right, so I'm gonna. All right, sorry.
My guess is that Soldier Swarm is not playabilized because of its high difficulty level and the many different avenues you can take towards the end of the game. It's very not autoplay as much as something say I don't know, Handbuff is.
Yeah.
Is that what you're gonna say,
I mean, people would disagree that Handbuff is like super easy to play. I know that like Freddy thinks it's like highly skilled deck, right?
Handbuff, I don't know. Yeah. Handbuff is pretty brain dead. I mean, like, it has a little bit of nuance. Like, if you want to try win harder matchups. But yeah, it's pretty. As far as decks go, it's not the hardest for sure. Yeah, but I was going to say the same thing. Soldiers is pretty difficult to play. Yeah, maybe also just matchups. Like it's not a good feeling like queuing into, I don't know, a Scoia'tael or something and like Pyrotechnician Archer. Oh shoot, kill all my guys. What the heck is this deck? How am I meant to win with this? You know?
Yeah, it can be infuriating for sure.
Yeah,
Decoy
like I think
Pyro.
it has quite a few like really bad matchups and then quite a few like really good ones. So especially if you're not piloting it like as efficiently as you could. So yeah, that's probably why. But as far as what I think is dominant, yeah, I mean, it comes back to whether you think popular deck counts as being dominant. I think the Tempo Calvi deck is really popular, especially on like normal ranked compared to Pro Ladder. But I wouldn't say that deck is, yeah, I wouldn't say it's very good compared to the alternatives. And then equally, you can have like a hand buff shaping the meta. If there's not much control going around, then that deck's just going to wreak havoc. So yeah, it comes back to there being so many different ways to play Nilfgaard. Like, it just depends what the meta's showing you at any point.
Sure.
What can do best.
Right, so we're gonna move to the next question, and this seems to be a fairly long one. Let's I'll give it a shot. So it's from another teammate of ours, Mr. Ultraman, also known as Alessio. Basically, wow, this is pretty long. And she has the most diversity in archetypes, using both faction and neutral bronzes together in a lot of different situations. Right, so this is about spies. What could make Spy NG playable without being problematic as before? Do you think the deck was oppressive as a top tier deck back in the day? Wow. I think spies were like as we talked like initially, like spies were always good, I would say, but like they were kind of like broken when like Enforcer could like do that like Gatling gun thing, because it would like pretty much like making like what like 18 to 20 point every single game, which is kind of crazy. But I think like a deck was like really tricky to play, and like anyone actually like playing the deck like can confirm, because like basically like if you make like I mean I guess it's the same with any like deck if you play it on high level, but like single misplay was like being punished really hard, and it was like probably the deck where like sequencing mattered the most. But how can you make the deck better without making it I don't know. I kind of think like Enforcers like before the midwinter patch like were okay. I think like that spy status was probably like the best one in my opinion. You could argue that even nowadays spies are like fairly viable, but you just can't like do a ladder with them, because like you just being like destroyed by like alchemy and like shoop and like bunch of stuff. But I don't know, it's a tough question. I'm not like here to balance stuff, but I would say the spies like back in the days were probably okay. Yeah, what about you, Mr. Chezzy?
Yeah, it's a two-bit question, right? So what basically, did I think it was an oppressive deck back in the day? I mean, pre-Midwinter, right, it was in a tier on its own. It was slightly better than every other deck. However, its win rate didn't reflect how strong it was because of how difficult it was to pilot. I think it's pretty much the pinnacle of balancing, in my opinion, right? Like, if you're going to have a deck that is the best, which there always should be, right? There's almost always going to be a deck that's the best. I think Spies was the perfect example of how you do that, how you make a deck the best, because it didn't have insane play rates. Its play rates were low, even though it was the best deck in the game. Its win rate wasn't really high. However, the best players were always getting the best scores with Spies because it was the best. A lot of that comes down to how difficult it is to pilot, how different the strategy is against all different matchups, and its flexibility. I really think back before Midwinter, if I'm coming in from a design point of view, not from a my favorite deck to play, I think Spy Nilfgaard is the best deck that Gwent's ever seen. Now, I haven't played the game as long as everyone else, but personally, I think that's the best design deck I'd ever seen. What is funny, though, is that after Midwinter, even with the machine gun enforcers, it dropped a spot, right? Because Casino Dwarfs was a thing, and Casino Dwarfs was just even more ridiculous than enforcers, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of that is lost, right? People forget that machine gun enforcers weren't even the biggest problem back then. That they
that's
wasn't even the biggest issue back then. So obviously, I don't think machine gun enforcers was the correct way to go. And I think if you just put spies back to how it was back in the day, I think the meta's evolved, the way it's changed. The one thing that Spy Nilfgaard did do, one of the reasons I really loved it, is it kept greedy decks in line, right? If Spy Nilfgaard was back to how it was, I don't think greatswords would be played anywhere near as much, right? Because alchemy counters greatswords, but nowhere near as well as Spy Nilfgaard. Spy Nilfgaard is as close to order win as you can get against greatswords. It's also very favored against consume. It does punish these greedy decks, so I really like Spy Nilfgaard. And if I was to make it good, I would just put it back to how it was before Midwinter. I think it was spot on then, and I think that's what I would do. We've had what 8-9 months since it was thing. I don't think it's a bad thing to go back, revert it. Obviously, Homecoming's going to change things, so I don't think they will. But if Homecoming wasn't coming and we were doing a balanced patch right now to make Spy Nilfgaard great again, I think I'd just put it back to how it was pre Midwinter.
All right, so we agree on that one. How about you, Mr. Gorflow?
Okay, well, this is a kind of complex question because
of course,
the question is, what could make Spy Nilfgaard playable without being problematic as before? So to answer that question, I suppose that first I need to figure out what problematic means for Spy Nilfgaard. I'm not really even sure that it was problematic. I know it was certainly very strong. And I guess going into the second question, maybe to help answer the first one, do you think the deck was oppressive as a top-tier deck back in the day? I don't think it was oppressive. I think it was strong. I wouldn't say oppressive. I feel not Axeman. I feel greatswords are oppressive, but Spy Nilfgaard was strong, but it wasn't like, it wasn't like it just shaped the entire meta around it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, or anything I'm saying here doesn't make sense. Just this is my personal opinion. I don't feel that it was at that level. I thought the machine gun enforcers, where they, you did your big spy chain, the enforcer hits the board and then it does all its pings right away. I thought that was okay. I mean, I may be a little biased because I used to play spies a lot as well.
No, the machine gun enforcers were where you didn't have to chain it. You just put enforcer down any time and it just pinged for how many spy units were on the board.
Okay, got it.
People forget about that. People forget about it, right?
We went, I forgot. It's been so long. We went from enforcers pinging for the number of spies played that turn to machine gun enforcers to enforcers that don't do anything at all until the next turn, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand that at all. I don't understand that one bit. Like, it's like taking it from balanced to OP down to unplayable. This is just summarizing what you guys already said. Put the Nilfgaard, the spies back. I don't know if I've been saying soldiers this whole time, but I meant spies if I said soldiers. Put spies back to the way they were before. Just have them, do their effect with the spies played on the turn that they were played, and return it to a playable faction. Right now, if you even dare to play an enforcer, boom, zapped right away. You don't get one turn. But if you can at least get some value out of your enforcers the turn that the chain brings them out, right, then they're playable. Then there's some sort of reason to play the deck. And I don't think it was problematic before. I think it was strong, and I think that Spies has seen its fair share of nerfs and buffs. It's been all over the place in the meta, and I think it just needs to be back in a spot where enforcers do their ability turn of the spy plays, and we'll be in a good spot.
All right, nice.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said. Yeah.
I have to give you the floor, man. You gotta wait.
I'm sorry. I'm too eager.
I have to say, well, about you, Mr. Benny, and then you.
And then I reply.
Yeah.
I'm just too earnest. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, I agree with all that. I don't know. Would it be good if you even changed it to how it was before? Like back in the day, in closed beta, or was it open beta, early open beta, when it was strong, whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not even sure it would be that good now. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not, like, back then there wasn't much in the way of removal, I want to say. My memory sucks, but I feel like it just got away with, like, the best counter to spies was, like, playing spies back and then killing their enforcers with your enforcers, right?
Yeah.
So nowadays there's, like, a lot of removal. There's alchemy, there's shoot, maybe you can even put full test in there with all the death molds and stuff. I'm not even sure you could thrive with that kind of spice, but yeah, maybe it would definitely be more viable than it is now, right? So that would be a nice change. But, yeah.
Well, I feel like the real, I think it would be, at least in a playable state, I feel like the real strength right now, if Soldiers was returned to the way it used to be, the real strength would lie in the damage you can deal out in little bits spread amongst however many units you want. That level of control of dealing the damage could then allow you to, say, snipe a greatsword and maybe, not overcommit too many points to killing a greatsword, or prevent swarm decks from taking off like Soldier Swarm. Maybe it would, I don't know. It's hard to imagine what a change like that would bring to the meta, but I feel as though the little bits of damage you can just deal out there would give it kind of an edge. It would also help with RKEs. You could just pull the armor off 3 of them at a time, maybe, if there's 3 of them out.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the biggest difference it would make is it would give spies now more reach, because they're so vulnerable to the pass right now, right? But if you allow the spy change to get you points for your enforcers, right, it gives spies back some reach, which is something they really, really lack at the moment, right? Because they are an engine deck now. You have to play the engine and hope it doesn't get removed. So by letting you chain and your enforcer then come out as a 16, 18 point bronze card off the chain, gives you a bit more reach, right? I think that's the one thing that it would do. Now, would that make it viable? Would it make it back to being tier 1? Probably not, but it definitely would help, I think.
Yeah. Right, so we have time for one more question. It's from newest Open 7 participant, Miss Radu Andrada. So it's a very, very good question. It's probably a favorite one so far for me. So what's the difference between Khalid and Amir, and why is Khalid the leader for 3 different archetypes? Soldiers, Alchemy, and Tempo, while Amir is more powerful. This is a really, really good question. And if you go back in the day, like people would even play Khalid with spies. So like Khalid is obviously like a really, really good leader, and just the fact that you can like magic it. I mean, I guess you can magic Amir as well, so it's not like. But Amir is like kind of has like some like niche scenarios where you can like use him like properly. So you can't really like replay him round 3 and like I don't know. It just seems a bit clunky. Whereas like Khalid just gets you reliably a card, and if you like tin well, you're likely to find another goal. So I don't know. I think Khalid is probably like, in my opinion, like stronger among those 2. Even if we agree that like Amir's ability is like fundamentally like broken, if you think about it. But I would have to say that like I'm kind of like leaning towards like camp like that. Like Khalid is like really, really good. Yeah, I mean, you just like it just works in like so many decks, like because like there's no real downside. I guess downside is like if your Khalid shows you 3 ointments or something like that. Yeah. But it doesn't happen often, and like if you do your job well, you usually have like like 4 cards left in round 3, and then by Kill Calvite is guaranteed to find Vilgefortz into another gold, and you know the drill. So yeah, I would say it's mainly because of the deck consistency, and it just gives like a huge finisher. But those are my thoughts. Yeah, what about you, Mr. Gorflow?
Okay. Like you said, consistency is Calvite's defining characteristic. It lets you look at the next 3 cards in your deck, which is super great because you can then pick from them. And if it's late in the game and you're using Calvite either for the first time or off of Kahir, you can basically access any card that might have been at the bottom of your deck, any kind of finisher. It's hard to compare the two because I feel they do almost completely different things. You could think of Emir as like a 7-point decoy almost, with a little bit of extra utility, bringing cards off the battlefield back into your hand for whatever that could be used for. In some niche situations, I guess that could save you if they play Iris or something like that. But Calvite, on the other hand, is like a super strong version of maybe Dandelion Poet, right? It's 5 points on top of playing another card. It just gives you that extra, visibility deeper into your deck. So I think that Calvite, of course, is played because of the consistency it adds to those lists. But I think also due to the fact that it's not, I don't think that there are very prevalent decoy targets in those lists, and it's hard to say that for Soldier Swarm because it does have some good decoy targets, right? But I think Soldier Swarm is more in need of consistency than extra power, which is why Calvite is played there. And Emir, I think, was run so much in Spies because of Kalok and the utility in the mirror, bringing an opponent's emissary off of your board, so they no longer get the buff for their enforcers and their brigades. There's just not like a Kalok equivalent in today's lists, which I think might be part of why Emir's not played as much. That's, again, like, if anything I'm saying doesn't make any sense, feel free to jump in and let me know. Because I see you're kind of
No, I agree.
You do? All right. I mean, that's about it, really. Calvite's just he's consistency, and Nilfgaard needs consistency these days, so that's why we see that leader.
Tinning is winning. All right, so
exactly.
How about you, Mr. Freddy?
Yeah, I think that's all right. Consistency, yeah, really important. And just like, yeah, as you were saying, Beardy, like the power of Kahir on Calvite is so much more than Emir because he's just not reliable enough. Like, you'd have to save some kind of target, and that's just never good. And when Emir's been good in the past, yeah, Sialak is like the one that jumps to mind, and then you've got Handbuff now, which is like, and Mill as well. Like, Emir is just sort of the break the game leader, right? He just kind of, he does something wacky, like that you always do every game, and it's gonna like give you a huge amount of power, but it just doesn't work in so many decks that don't have that tool that they need to use him with. And yeah, just 5 points plus a card is like so good, and you get to choose and you get to see, and it helps Vilgefortz, which is one of the best golds in Nilfgaard. Yep. So yeah, it's just like you can't really say anything bad about the Calvite, so why not run him?
Also Joachim.
Yeah.
Joachim?
Joachim's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, like, see, apparently, like, lots of cards are good in Nilfgaard. Who would know? Yeah. So, like, finally, what are like your thoughts, Mr. Chezzy?
So I really like this question, right? I think it's a very interesting question because I do think Emir is the better leader in power level, right? He is you will get more value from Emir in a perfect scenario than Calvite, just off their abilities. The reason that I think Calvite is the one that's running all of these decks, right, is that consistency is arguably the most important thing in Gwent, right? You see all the best decks that have pretty much almost all the best decks that have ever been been in the game, have been there because they're very, very strong, but two, they're super, super consistent, right? Spy Nilfgaard, thin to 0. For example, great swords, right? Now it doesn't thin quite as well, but the guaranteed access to great swords through crack, right? You've got guaranteed access. You've got the spy access. So the consistency to the things that you really, really need. The pirate captains, these tutor effects, right? So I really think that I think and Calvit just adds that level of consistency that Emir really doesn't, right? Emir needs you to have a perfect hand to get full value out of Emir, right? So Emir's a win more leader to a large extent, right? Because you need to have the perfect hand for Emir to find full value. But if you've got the perfect hand, you're probably going to win anyway. But the reason Spies ran it was because it was so consistent, right? It could thin to 0 even without Calvit, right? Calvit actually made you over thin, and then you became more reliant on Azir. Whereas with Emir, you didn't have to. It wasn't another thin card, right? You could, well, I guess it was because he was playing Kalak, but Spies didn't need that consistency, right? They were already basically 100% consistent, right? That was why Spies was so good, was it was so consistent. It didn't need Calvit. And when you don't need the Calvit for the consistency, Amir's the go-to choice, right? Because Amir's better, he's stronger. So I think I know Saber and myself, and I know Lockin actually came to me one day and asked me what my thoughts were on Emir and Soldiers, because Soldiers is very, very consistent. The problem is Soldiers need access to their key cards at key moments, and Calvit can do that, right? He can bail you out of a really, really tricky scenario. So say for example you're against Axeman and you've got Vanamar, but he's not in your hand. The only way you're going to win that game is if you get access to Vanamar, and Calvit can do that. Emir can't, even though Emir's got the more points, right? Decoying your sentry is insane. Decoying a recruit to get another slave infantry is really, really strong. But it doesn't have. You can lose a game from not drawing the card you need, right? And Calvit lets you do that, and Emir doesn't. And I think that's why, right? Basically, consistency is more powerful than points to a large extent, right? Because what good is having this super powerful card if you don't have access to the cards you actually need for it? So I think that's why Calvit is the leader of these factions, whilst in my opinion still being worse than Emir in pure point value. So I think that's probably why Calvit is the leader of these factions. But when you see consistency not being an important thing, that's when you see Emir being run, right? So I think that's probably why Calvit's the more popular leader right now.
Right, so I think it's time to wrap this up. I think like this episode was maybe a bit longer, but it's all because we are all so passionate about NG, and like I quite enjoyed it. Like it just like passion, like straight up from everyone. Yeah, I hope we answered these submissions well enough, and I would like to thank both the guys who submitted the questions and our respected guests. So thank you, Mr. Gorflow.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and thank you, my favorite Brit, Mr. Freddy.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And of course, my co-host Chezzy. Thanks. It's always a pleasure doing this with you. Anything more to add, Brando?
No, I thought it's been a brilliant show again. Thanks again to Gorflow and to Freddybabes for joining us. Thanks to everybody for tuning in today. I've really enjoyed this. Obviously, this is my favorite faction, so I was looking forward to this one. So I've had a lot of fun. It's been great. Yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in today. Next Sunday we are going to be joined by our teammates DG Thunderer and Complexity Card Gaming's Coley Moen. One last thing before we wrap up is I just want to say a huge congratulations to Miss Radu Andrada for actually qualifying for the next Gwent Open. She did it through the online qualifiers. So huge congratulations to her. She will be the first lady to grace a live event stage. So absolutely, from myself, I'm super proud. and I know the whole team is super proud. Everybody's so proud of you. So congratulations, and go kick some ass in Open. Sorry, Freddie, but
No,
I'm pretty sure as much as we all love you here, we only want you to finish second this time. So, but no. Best of luck to both of you. Good luck, Freddie, in that as well.
thank
and
you.
with that, we'd just like to say thank you to everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week, guys. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Bye.